From North Dakota's Enchanted Highway, my special guests today are some of the world's largest pheasants. Yeah, it gets a little bit weird out here in North Dakota, no question about that. But from this setting, I bring to you a 90-degree holy wallowa with today's commitment from a consensus 4-star. From a consensus top 150 offensive linemen, that being Tommy Tofi, and this one's got me excited. I'm certainly going to talk about my excitement here as this TSOW shorter commentary certainly progresses. I've got my loose leaf paper. I've got my notes. I'm reading my chicken scratch here. You can certainly tell that I'm out of the TSOW studio, but when I was in the passenger seat today, I figured, okay, let me dial up this Tommy Tofi film. Because when I talked about him about a month or so ago, really before he was scheduled to visit, and then he committed to Cal, I was like, I watched him. Everybody looks towards his height. Everybody looks towards his weight. Everybody looks towards 6'5". Everybody looks towards 340 pounds. And when you look at that frame and that stature, and let's call it as it is, that's an NFL frame. That's an NFL stature from a guy who's going to be playing high school football next season. I talked about that on the last TSOW when I was talking a couple of days ago in front of the Yellowstone River. But I look at Tofi, and I think what excites me the most about him, I think he can be elite at guard. I think he can be elite at tackle. When everybody looks to the frame, I look at his quickness. I look at his feet. That's, I think, what gets me most excited, because when you look at the frame, when you look at the power, he can bowl guys over, certainly in the run game, when you kind of maybe slide him in at guard, but when you need a little bit more agility, when you need a little bit more quicker feet at that offensive tackle position, and that's where he's playing on his high school tape. Go to 24/7. Go to On3. He's playing offensive tackle, and he's playing offensive tackle at an elite level. So I think that he can play both, and I think that he can play both certainly at a very high level of play with the Oregon Ducks. So I was kind of strolling through Twitter a little bit in the passenger seat today, and people were throwing around the name Penei Sewell. And I know you guys in Oregon, in the Oregon community, certainly don't throw around the Penei Sewell name lightly. But the thing that popped up to my mind, if you think that way about Tommy, what do you think about Emmanuel Ainacho? Which kind of leads me in to my next point, because now I know there's other guys on the board. Hey, what's Devon Benjamin going to do? What's Jalen Lott going to do? You know, some of these other guys. But to really put the cap, I think, on this offensive line class, now the focus really turns to Emanuel Ainacho. And we talked about the Penei Sewell comparisons that maybe some people have thrown around about Tommy Tofi, but you got to throw around that about Emanuel Ainacho as well. You know, when Penei was playing, he was kind of one of a kind on that Oregon offensive line. You put both these together, if Tofi's at guard, Nacho's at tackle, or if one's at one tackle and one's at the other tackle, like these offensive lines for Oregon these past couple of years they've been outstanding. I mean, you look at Joe Moore Award finalists, you put those two guys on the offensive line. I talked about Doug Utu. You look at Zaire Addison, who was in last year's class, like all of a sudden this offensive line and what the future is really looking like, it is elite. It is as good as it gets. I truly believe that in college football, and they've certainly proven via the transfer portal to be able to do some things. So do some really good things and acquire some really good players and acquire some really good size, which is kind of what we're talking about here. But it gets me so excited, the potential, if they can seal the deal with Nacho, to have Emanuel Ainacho and Tommy Tofi potentially playing next to each other on an offensive line. Imagine that. Two guys at 6'6", 340 pounds, or whatever they're going to be in a couple of years. Because here's what I feel about Tommy and Nacho, if Nacho does indeed commit to Oregon and he lands on campus. These are guys that can maybe sniff around the rotation in 2026, but when you get to 2027, I would be surprised if both of these guys aren't starting at this point in time, once again, if Nacho does indeed sign on the dotted line with the Oregon Ducks. So I know a lot of people are kind of saying, well, you know, they're kind of looking ahead a little bit, looking into the future, but these are guys kind of like a Josh Connerly, where they can start a handful of years and they can be impactful from day one on campus right now. I'm very curious if Tommy Tofi does slot in at guard. Are they going to be in play for another offensive tackle in this class. We know Calvin Obot has recently committed over to Utah. But, man, Oregon fans, you got to be excited about what Alik Terry is doing right now in this offensive line. I know post Cody Green, post Jackson Cantwell, there was a little bit, wasn't quite sure how to feel about offensive line recruiting, but it certainly trended in the right direction. I've been crouching down this whole time. My knees are getting tired. It's a little bit hot out here. I got to get back into the air-conditioned car, but from the special guest being the pheasants behind me, from the Enchanted Highway on here in North Dakota, the next time I talk to you, I'm going to be in the friendly confines of the studio. So until then, this has been That Show Out West.